Hi, I'm David. I'm a visual artist and educator with BRIC. Today, in honor of Black History Month, we will be pulling inspiration from the works of the artist Kerry James Marshall. Marshall is an African-American painter, and his works depict the environment of his youth during the civil rights era of the 1960s. He often places Black figures in vibrant colors in traditional settings where you might find people every day. For this activity, you're going to need a pencil, some watercolor brushes, some water, a bristle board or cardstock paper, and if you don't have watercolors, markers can work as well. Let's consider what's happening in your environment and where you're placing your characters. Now remember, Kerry James Marshall tends to use traditional American settings, so if we're trying to replicate his style, we really want to have an environment that's very similar to the work that he's created in the past. I personally went into my own cell phone to find a reference for my image. To begin, I want you to take your pencil and start sketching on your bristle board. Now, once you're done sketching, which I want you to do very, very lightly, because I really want you to consider that you're going to be using the watercolor for your details, and you just really want to use your sketch as an outline for your picture, for your work of art. I would avoid jumping into any extreme darks. I'm really going to lean into my medium tones to begin. Now, Kerry James Marshall tends to use a lot of monochromatic, dark, black, gray tones for his figures. So I'm just gonna lay down a nice gray base for the face of my subject. Watercolor tends to dry pretty quickly. So it's okay for you to move on while one section dries and you continue to work on other portions and probably double back to add more color to that section later on. Like I said before, the more you bounce around, the more you will slowly see your piece come together. Now, what's interesting about the background is that our subject is in the foreground. So most of our focus and details will be on our subject. But the background, what's really interesting is that you can be very, very light and loose and patchy. Like, you don't have to be as regulated as you are when you're trying to keep all these specific details on what's so close to the audience's eye. Now, if you look closely, I'm really trying to replicate Kerry James Marshall. I'm giving my character a monochromatic, dark gray tones, rather than pulling the brown flesh tones of my character. My greens are very, very vibrant, so I'm gonna mix my green with a little bit of gray and black just to give it a nice darker tone, like the shadowy green in my original source. I'm really trying to target my darkest areas with this stroke. Now, there tends to be a lot of like shadowy. Some of it might be a little bit of like creative license, but I'm really trying to make sure I grab the dark tones because he's wearing a bubble jacket and there's nice shadows in all the pockets of the crevices of the jacket, so I really want to try to grab that. I'm adding some grays into the blue. I still feel like I can go darker with my blue, but I'll take it slow, not gonna rush. All right, so now we're gonna jump into the background a little bit more, a little heavier. I think we worked on these buildings over here, and I think, there's a lot of grays and tans on the concrete of this skate park. And don't forget, guys, we are trying to imitate Kerry James Marshall. So having our subject in something that's considerably American, as a skate park, or it could be like a diner, in the contemporary sense, I would say. In my reference, there's shadows gleaming all over the place, but then you can really come back in with a wet brush and really spread some of those tones. A lot of like grays, so let's move it around a little bit, get some color in here. And like I said, because it's the background, you don't have to be so focused on being so clear and detailed. The human subject is the real object that's really grabbing our attention. I have a sky blue and I have a teal that I'm really trying to mix, try to capture this blue of the sky from my reference image. There you go, that's looking good. Pretty close to the reference. And don't forget to use some water. That'll really help you break up that and loosen it up a little bit. I'll mix a little bit of blue, a little bit of gray. I'm gonna come in with some dark tones so I can really try to capture that style that Kerry James gives with his figures, his people of color. He's really literally using black to pull them from the canvas. And remember, we're looking at our reference the entire time, looking back and forth, looking at my reference. And all I'm doing is looking at my reference and pulling from it. And there you have it. Here's our watercolor painting inspired by Kerry James Marshall and his works of art. Now you can continue on if you want to. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this activity and learning about the works of Kerry James Marshall.